Hello, my name is Jaleesa Tate, and I serve as the State Hazard Mitigation Officer at Maryland Emergency Management Agency. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you today why we say mitigation is the center of the universe. I'd like to start off by first looking at how we think about Maryland. If you go to Google and you search Maryland tourism, a lot of pictures come up that all involve water. We have the town of Ocean City, we have Harper's Ferry, and a lot of other places. So water is definitely important to society. It also helps us with our economic development, recreation, and a lot of employment within Maryland as well too. If we do the same thing and we search Maryland flooding, a lot of those same places that we cherish so much, they also come up. So we have Ellicott City, we have Baltimore City, City of Annapolis, and there have been historic flooding events in Harper's Ferry and Ocean City as well too. So here at MEMA, our mission is to coordinate people, organizations, resources, and information. We also are set to ensure the safety and resilience of people, businesses, communities, infrastructure, and the environment. One of my major roles here at MEMA is to make sure that we serve as a conduit for FEMA grants. So this includes the Presidential Disaster Declarations and other federal assistance that's available before, during, and after a disaster. So for us, we look at trying to take a multi-pronged approach to risk reduction. So we have a few different areas where we really focus and prioritize our efforts. So that includes hazard mitigation, so actual construction projects, and then planning as well too. Looking at how we can make a change from a legislative and policy standpoint, ensuring that we are building partnerships, so we always have a multidisciplinary approach to mitigating our hazards, making sure that we are providing education and outreach to our community members that are also impacted by these disasters, and then overall developing a framework for our disaster risk reduction initiatives. So one of the major things that we've been focusing on is definitely shifting the culture of emergency management within our state. So traditionally, emergency management is approached from a cycle standpoint. So there is an impact, followed by response, and then recovery activities. Then mitigation has served as kind of its own part of the cycle, followed by preparedness efforts. So this has perpetuated the disaster rebuild cycle within our society. So in terms of shifting the culture, we no longer want to wait for an impact and then follow up with our response, recovery, mitigation efforts. It's really important that we do approach emergency management from these different mission areas. So that way we are not siloing any of our efforts. What we have learned is that we are definitely not going to be able to respond our way out of vulnerability. We have to adequately prepare and adapt to address the changes that are happening around us. So what is Maryland doing overall? Again, from the hazard mitigation standpoint, traditionally we've done a lot of asset-focused mitigation. So this means looking at individual structures. So here you have a commercial acquisition demolition that occurred in Baltimore County. So as you can see in the upper left-hand corner, there was a significant flooding occurring at this site. The property and the structure, they were purchased, they were demolished. They'll be deeded open space in perpetuity, and that area has returned back to a green space. We've also done elevation projects as well throughout our communities. So here are two different residential structure elevations in the city of Crisfield. So in these instances, we will literally raise the house up to try and alleviate and reduce the flooding that might be occurring and impacting the home directly. So over the past few years, we've definitely begun to refine our approach to how we conduct hazard mitigation. So here is a picture of an eroded shoreline in the town of Betterton. It sits on the Chesapeake Bay. And so with this project, we really say that these are community-based projects. So it's going to be projects that have a larger impact and benefit to a larger portion of the population. So with this project, there will be 12 different residential structures that will be able to benefit. Also looking at how do we increase the level of protection for our critical infrastructure and utilities. So as you can see from these pictures, the erosion is extremely close to the road. It has actually had to be closed due to public safety reasons. And eventually, when this is mitigated and the project is complete, it will provide protection to this roadway as well as the underground utilities. The idea here is to use a mix of gray and green infrastructure. So again, looking at how do we get additional benefits out of our project. So not only will it have the benefit of stopping the erosion, but it will have the benefit of increasing the habitat in this area as well too. So at the bottom of this slope, there will be riprap installed as well as a retaining wall. Backfill will be placed, and then a vegetated kind of buffer area will be planted to stabilize the slope as well too. For this project, I also like to mention that there's been a lot of community buy-in. Each one of the property owners here have contributed financial resources as well as their time to look for additional grants to make sure that the project can move forward. Here's another example of larger community-based projects. So this is a culvert infrastructure improvement in Ellicott City. So as you can see in the picture on the left-hand side, there's been significant flooding at this particular culvert and through Main Street of Ellicott City. And so with this project, it will reduce the flooding that's occurring right there by enlarging the culvert. So it's going to increase the conveyance of water in this area, which will reduce the amount of flooding that is overtopping the roadways and then impacting homes directly as well. As you can see in the top middle picture, the water has kind of undercut a lot of the properties, and what you see there is exposed utilities as well as the basement being exposed at that residential property. Okay. So additional projects that have been completed within Maryland, one of my projects I really like to highlight is the flood control project in the city of Frederick. So this is the Carroll Creek project. And what I really like about this project is that it really does boost the code benefits of the project. So yes, the primary focus is definitely the flood control portion of the project. However, this project also offers opportunities for historic preservation and economic development as well too. This also serves as a beautification project for the city of Frederick. So these are again projects that we would deem as being community-based because of the amount of benefits that it has and also the larger benefit it provides to the population. So moving away from our construction projects and looking at hazard mitigation planning, so we do hazard mitigation planning throughout the entire state. So the planning efforts, they really provide an opportunity for communities to take a step back, evaluate what their hazards are, identify their vulnerabilities, and then create a roadmap for how they're going to address their hazards and vulnerabilities. There are 4 major components to hazard mitigation planning. So it's going to be the hazard identification and risk assessment, the vulnerability assessment, capability assessment, and then the mitigation strategy. So hazard mitigation planning does have several benefits. I will also say that in order to be eligible for certain categories of the federal disaster assistance, the hazard mitigation plans are also a requirement for eligibility. So in addition to that, benefits can include increasing community awareness and buy-in, so that throughout the course of these projects that you do have community support to make sure that they are successfully implemented. Identifying your capabilities and gaps. That way you kind of know where you stand and perhaps what resources you are lacking, so then you can prioritize filling those gaps. Integrating existing community plans to develop a comprehensive approach. So making sure that your local, community plan or comprehensive plan, you are not designating growth areas and hazardous areas and so forth. This also provides an opportunity to continuously build partnerships with people who you might not think of as traditional emergency management partners. Minimizing future recovery efforts. So again, if we can increase the level of protection of our communities, then that will shorten the recovery time and get us back to this normalcy that we look for after a disaster. It provides the opportunity to leverage resources. And then again, this is definitely a way for us to plan to break the disaster rebuild cycle. Okay. So from the state perspective, over the course of the past several months, MEMA has been leading the effort to update the state's hazard mitigation plan. So due to the pandemic, we were not able to go out and do in-person engagements, but we did establish a virtual meeting room in which participants and the community members can go to that website. They can look at what hazards exist for their communities, what critical facilities might be impacted, and what state facilities might be impacted. The website is still active, so you can check that out as well too. It does have the draft plan there, as well as previous meeting materials as well. From a local perspective, currently right now, we only have 2 hazard mitigation plans that are in development within our state. Kent County's plan has actually recently been approved by FEMA and then locally adopted. So all of our communities actively have a plan to make sure that they are addressing those risks and vulnerabilities in their communities and that they are aware of the hazards that might be impacting them. Okay. The land partnerships. I would like to say that MEMA has really been focused on seeking out non-traditional partnerships recently. So this includes expanding beyond who might be the traditional emergency management partners, such as Department of Transportation, Department of the Environment, Department of Natural Resources. So we've started to look at how can we incorporate more nature-based solutions into the work that we're doing so we can maximize our co-benefits. So from that, we kind of went on this pathway of seeking out partnerships with the Nature Conservancy, the Eastern Shoreline Conservancy, Shore Rivers, and several other organizations as well too. In addition to that, we've really started to focus and emphasize multi-agency coordination at the state level and federal level. So this includes sitting on different agencies, review panels for the grants programs that they administer, looking at ways that we can work together and collaborate on projects for our communities, and then as well as looking at ways we can leverage our resources. In addition to this, we've also started building partnerships with other resilience experts throughout the world. So that includes a partnership with the Netherlands as well too, so we can bring the years of their subject matter expertise with flooding to our communities here in Maryland. So from a legislative and policy standpoint, although there's been several major accomplishments in the state, the one I want to highlight today is the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund. So this will serve as an infusion of $25 million for us to support resiliency-focused projects within our communities here in Maryland. So this is kind of, I would like to say, the biggest infusion of funding that we've had in the state so far. And it's an opportunity we are really excited about so we can help Maryland communities. From a national standpoint, the Executive Director of MEMA co-chairs the National Emergency Management Association's Resilience Committee. So this provides an opportunity to have a voice on a national scale so that we can make sure that resilience is prioritized through federal legislation, policies, and programs as well. In addition to that, we also chair the State Hazard Mitigation Officer Subcommittee, which essentially serves as a technical advisement body to the Resilience Committee. And we're also a member of FEMA's External Stakeholders Working Group, which provides a direct opportunity to engage with FEMA headquarters as they begin to refine their policies, programs, and initiatives. In regards to education and outreach, this is incredibly important, especially when we start talking about preparedness. And it's important to recognize that we are all impacted by disasters and emergencies. And so we all play a part in making sure that we mitigate the risk as well too. So it's really important for us to build community buy-in from beginning to end. We don't ever want to set out with a solution without having the community be a part of coming to that solution. So it's not only about engaging the public and community members, but also empowering them throughout that process as well. So again, I've talked a lot about co-benefits of projects. So not only looking at, okay, are we reducing flood risk and improving the environment, But also, are there opportunities to incorporate community amenities into our projects as well too, so that overall we are uplifting the entire community? And whole community is so important because, again, we all share this risk. So we have to focus multi-generational. So that includes, looking at children and their preparedness efforts, ensuring that they understand their risk to hazards and flood risk and what can they do to address those risks. Faith-based organizations and places of worship, they're trusted members of the community and they're excellent partners to make sure that we can reach the community in times of need and get them important information that's needed. We have to also make sure that we're looking at renters and homeowners as well too. A lot of times, especially what we've experienced in Maryland with some of the flooding incidents recently, is that a lot of places that have flooded have been rental places or else commercial facilities where the business owner was leasing the property. So it's important to educate, renters and homeowners alike about what availability they have for flood insurance and what measures they can take to protect their investments as well. Looking for subject matter expertise in the academia, nonprofits, and private sector. And then in addition to that, looking at ways to leverage and maximize resources. So these are, again, great opportunities for partnership as well too, and to diversify the investment into our hazard mitigation initiatives. Okay. So with all of that, there are still a lot of limitations and challenges that we have to address as we carry out our mitigation programs. So timing is normally the biggest one. At the bottom of the slide, I provide just an overview of what the timing looks like when we administer FEMA's hazard mitigation assistance programs. So again, you'll see the impact happens, and we have approximately 1 year to complete our applications. So a lot of people will ask me, well, why don't we put in applications immediately? Why do we wait 1 year? So number one, FEMA establishes the guidance that we have 12 months to apply. So typically after a community has been impacted and they have an emergency or a disaster, they're focused on their immediate recovery needs. So looking at the things that need to be fixed immediately. That doesn't mean that we're not looking at mitigation opportunities. It just means that we are taking a step back to make sure that we incorporate mitigation activities throughout that process as well. So we have that 1 year review or 1 year application period, and then we submit those to FEMA for review. That can take anywhere from 6 months to a year for review, and then the projects are approved and people can begin implementing their projects. Okay? Other limitations include the cost share of projects. So a lot of financial resources are limited within our communities and local jurisdictions as well as the state level too. Individuals and businesses cannot apply directly for their FEMA grants, so they have to be sponsored by a local jurisdiction or another state agency. The activities cannot take place prior to approval. So this is a big one, especially when we are talking post-disaster. Everyone wants to make sure they hurry up and they go back in and they, repair and replace everything. But for the FEMA mitigation grants, at least, they will not pay for any work that has been completed prior to that approval. And again, as a reminder, it can take up to 2 years post-disaster for that approval to come through. Other limitations include layered priorities. So we have, when we're going through this FEMA grant process, you have priorities at the local level, then you might have to meet state priorities, and then of course meeting the federal priorities in order to have a successful grant. And then technical expertise. I think through all levels of government, this is an area that needs focus, and definitely this is why, again, I encourage everyone to build those partnerships and look at nonprofits, private sector, and academia for technical expertise as well. Okay, so some additional things that we have to look at as challenges. So looking at how do all of these puzzle pieces kind of fit together, and where do we have gaps and capabilities. So at the local level, there are tend to be a pattern of concerns regarding capacity and capability, challenges with securing costs or securing contractors, and then also being able to obtain the necessary cost share to implement projects. At the state level, again, capacity is definitely a concern, as well as restrictions on combining funding sources. So again, for the FEMA hazard mitigation assistance grants that we administer, those cannot be combined with any additional federal resources. So it always has to come from a non-federal source, such as state funding, local funding, or directly from the individual citizen if it's a project for the citizen. And then managing multiple events at once. Over the course of the past year, we've definitely experienced these cascading hazards as we've worked our way through the global pandemic, as well as handling other natural hazards and disasters that occurred within Maryland, such as Hurricane Isaias. And then from the grantor's perspective, the timelines is very hard to align funding sources timing wise. The availability of funding, a lot of times the funding might not be guaranteed from year to year. So sometimes as a applicant for this funding, it might be hard to kind of build out a project if you need funding for the design and engineering and then subsequent funding for the implementation and construction of the project. Sometimes within certain grant programs, the project type eligibility can also be very limited. So a lot of times, certain programs have a certain focus, and so it's very hard to build in those co-benefits that are very important for these projects. And then documenting the cost effectiveness, especially when it comes to the environmental benefits and quality of life benefits that a lot of these projects provide. So what do we do about this? Where are we right now? So in regards to looking ahead, at NEMO, we're definitely prioritizing those community-based projects because it does allow us to increase the level of protection across the entire community and protect a larger portion of the population, as well as, again, getting that community buy-in and looking at the co-benefits that are possible as well. Building partnerships and making sure we take a whole community approach. As I stated before, we all share the risk, and so we share the responsibility in mitigating that risk as well too. And again, expertise and resources can be found throughout our communities. Looking for flexible programs that encourage innovation. So again, these are reasons why we are looking to partner with the Netherlands to bring Dutch flood resilience expertise to our Maryland communities. And we are also looking at non-traditional ways to approach hazard mitigation and flood risk reduction, or reduction in general. And then how can we implement transformative mitigation? So again, going above and beyond what we would think of as traditional mitigation projects, like structure elevations and demolition and acquisition projects. So one most important that I'll leave off here with is the climate change impacts that we have today. And this is a big part of looking, I say, to tomorrow and then also further in the future as well too. So our communities are experiencing higher intensity precipitation events. So what does this mean? A lot of these events are occurring outside of the FEMA 1% annual chance boundary. So where we typically look for flooding to occur within the floodplain, flooding is actually occurring outside of those areas. So it's very important now to start to gather that data and run the analysis, because right now it's harder to pinpoint where and when these events might take place. These high intensity precipitation events, they also overwhelm our infrastructure. So a lot of infrastructure is aging, and a lot of it has not been built to future standards. So that's one important thing to look for as we start to develop new standards for future infrastructure. Other things that are impacting Maryland include nuisance flooding and high tide flooding. So these events tend to be inconvenient and not catastrophic. So this also means that the competition is a lot higher because these are considered like non-disaster events. So it is very competitive to try and get funding to produce projects and implement projects that address the nuisance and high tide flooding. Over time, this also deteriorates the infrastructure. So again, through FEMA hazard mitigation assistance programs and several other grant programs, they generally don't fund maintenance activities, or else they don't fund projects that are from deferred maintenance or anything like that. Okay, so again, leaving you today with just letting you know that mitigation is the center of the universe. And from our executive director here at NEMA, Russell Strickland, he says that by putting mitigation at the forefront, we prioritize building community resilience. Doing so permits us to execute all mission areas of emergency management from a safer perspective. So again, thank you for the opportunity to share why mitigation is so important to us here in Maryland and at Maryland Emergency Management Agency. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at mitigation.nema@maryland.gov. Thank you.